So you have no clue where something today is going to lead you in the future. But if you are only focused on, I need more downloads so I can go sell more sponsorship, think about what you're leaving on the floor.
Hey, I'm Joe Fier, and welcome to the Hustle and Flow Chart podcast. This is where we talk all about building businesses so they give you the freedom and fuel for your life. I'm not here to help you build a billion-dollar business, but I am here to help you create a business with systems that work for you so you can make more money than you need just by working part-time. You know, I was a chronic hustle mode kind of guy, and I want to share my experiences and mentors I've met along the way to help you reframe things to be the most effective as an entrepreneur. I wish I had this guidance and insight when I was younger, so that's what I'm doing here for you. Please share and enjoy. What's up? Today, we're talking about podcasting and content and media and PR and relationships with your community and growing a brand and monetizing and all the fun stuff you could do with content. So to go deep on this concept, I brought in the head of partnerships and growth over at Castmagic, and his name is Greg Wasserman. And he and I have been chatting for a while now, for a couple months or so in their community, and have exchanged a lot of ideas. And I've been using Castmagic. It's my favorite tool right now, and I've been pretty vocal about that. This episode, I think you'll understand why and what exactly it does and how to implement it, even if you're not a podcaster, because that's kind of how it started. But it can be used for an assortment of content to essentially give you a better preparation to create new content, or give you a lot more outputs and ways to repurpose content in your own voice, leveraging AI, but also still giving you the flexibility to make it your own. So in this episode, we're diving into the importance of how to create the strategic content and repurpose it in all the platforms to show up the best way, but also with the intention to create a lot of relationships with not only the people you might be podcasting or collaborating with through your content, but also the audience, to create a nice relationship, a bond, and this kind of feedback loop that is the fuel for everything you're doing. I mean, it's your business in a nutshell right here. And Castmagic, this tool has saved me so much time. It's helped me kind of revamp and optimize systems and workflows I have with my team. And it's been incredible. I've been showing these processes to people in some of this new coaching I rolled out. So that's why I brought Greg in here to really deep dive. And he thinks like I've been thinking as well. So make sure to take notes on this episode. And for Castmagic, there is a free trial that you can do to test this out. And I highly recommend doing that. So go to hustleandflowchart.com/Castmagic. That's CASTMAGIC. So that's hustleandflowchart.com/Castmagic. Go there, try it out. Let me know what you think. And make sure to go join their Slack community. Connect with Greg there and connect with the community. Because if you're looking to share a bunch of ideas with other podcasters and creators, their community is popping off. And if you're using this tool, Castmagic, you got to get in there because you'll get all the best practices right then and there. So hustleandflowchart.com/Castmagic. You'll love it. All right, let's get into this episode with Greg. Greg, we're rolling. It's great to be chatting with you today. How you doing, my man?
I'm great, man. Not bad for a Wednesday. I guess that's what we are. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say that on a podcast, right? Date it? Yeah, right?
It's all good. We got to record it sometime. It is Wednesday, y'all, but who knows what date we will not disclose.
Right.
But I guess I will disclose this. You're coming off a high from the podcast movement conference that just happened. So a lot of podcasters maybe listening here, or if you haven't heard of it, it's one of the big conferences out there. Yeah, and you were speaking there on the panels. You've been, you're the head of community growth, partnerships, all that for Castmagic. So there's a lot of reasons why we're chatting today and why it's so relevant for folks listening.
Yeah, it's excited to be here, and so much to cover, so little time, but
Always.
Let's do it.
Well, I already shouted out the cat in the bag, Castmagic, and I've been telling people about it left and right, in person, on my podcast, and my emails, training, all that. And this will not be a sales pitch for Castmagic at all, but it'll also be me saying very honestly that it's my favorite tool right now. And it's not just podcasters, but like if you're a coach, you're doing calls, summits, webinars, like really anything you're doing with content, you can run through this bad boy, and it'll essentially make a bunch of pieces of content for you, or at least start the process there. So you don't have to think so hard, work so hard. So I don't know if that pitch pitch really worked, but
I mean, look,
it's
you're the
epic.
user. There you
That's how I
go.
see it. Yeah, yeah. So we started chatting because of your community in Slack, which is a big piece I wanted to point out here because I talk about it a lot with the power community, fans, evangelists for your brand. And here you are, you're like, I don't know how many people are in your Slack group now.
Over 800, 900, maybe. Yeah.
Right? It was like 300 or 400 when I started, so it's picked
And we
up.
were like at 100 when I first came in April. So yeah,
Dang. And
we just
you're
keep
the
growing.
man there, right? You're you're manning it all. I mean, I see the channels. It's starting to pop off now.
When I joined, I never would have thought I'd be joining community, but it kind of goes to who I am. Like life is about time and relationships, and I'm like, I hate being middleman for anything,
Mm.
right? So it's like I don't want to control things. I'm like, look, if you know something and another person knows something, like let me bring those people together. Let
Yeah.
me create the network. So it kind of just became an easy transition and going like, all right, you come in, you tell me who you are, what you're looking for. I'll bridge the gaps and let's make this a useful tool community, right?
Yeah, man. And it's so powerful for a brand. And this is why I wanted to lead with this, the community, because that's how we got connected. You reached out, personally welcomed me to the community, and this is hundreds of people, now 800 of people, and it's growing. I know the user base is much more. And so it's impressive with the amount of growth, but I know it's being fueled through community. A lot of it is word of mouth. I mean, I just hear it within like a couple masterminds I'm in. It's been passed around as a gotta have tool. So I don't know. You're doing something powerful there. I'm curious of, yeah, I guess like how does that fit as a whole thing with Castmagic, like as part of the brand? Is it like obviously you're connecting with users. You're probably getting a lot of feedback. You're connecting users together as well. So it's like a deeper bond. Like how do you see that?
Yeah, let's take this since we're talking to potential podcasters. Like, let's take
Right.
this down in terms of a podcast route. Like, when you think about building community, if like let's say we're just doing this conversation right now. I have no clue. Is anyone listening? Are they giving us feedback? So it's nice to have a place. We use Slack to ultimately go like, give me feedback. Like, give me feedback on the product. Give me feedback of what I'm saying. Am I saying the right thing? So it's been great to understand like what people want out of the tool. And so that becomes a great piece. So from a podcast standpoint, you're like, all right, let me modify either my interviews or my style or so forth. You take it all with a grain of salt. So you kind of understand like what does a person want. But like a lot of the feedback we're getting there is fueling the birth and the growth of where the product's going. And then from a how do I use the community to not only support me, but to more support each other? And that's really where I think the use of community becomes in. Like, how do people go like, oh, I'm using this tool or I'm using this way or I'm coming up with this prompt? Like that's how we've got our cast magic. But then you look at it from a podcaster standpoint, like how do you fuel your ultimate engagement with people? How do they come and bond together over the content that you're listening to, that you're putting out, that they're reading? Like those are the cool moments that you get to kind of work through.
It is, man. And I love it when products have a community. And I just so happened to click on, I'll join the Slack community and see what's going on there. Wasn't expecting this, to be very honest. And I was like, I don't, well, didn't know what to expect. But when I popped in there, I was like, dude, this is such a resource. And just the fact that, like, I think a good action step is A, if you're using Castmagic, go join the community. But B, like any community associated to a tool or you know, just something that you're using, go pop in there and try to connect with people. And not only the people from the company, because you might get some cool insights that way and maybe collab on some stuff, but at least the people using it. It's such a cool way to share use cases, interact with other people, not silo ourselves, but ways to connect and, you know, guest podcast.
100%. I mean,
Yeah.
look, I'm in 40 plus Slack communities right now, all
Dang.
running the gamut in terms of all different things. So, like, you pop in when you need, but like, if you have a growth mindset, which I think a lot of podcasters do, if you have the growth mindset, you're like, I'm curious to always learn, whether it's honing my craft or understanding what other people are doing. From my career standpoint, it's always been, my last job, I ran 8 different business units I knew nothing about. So, just the curiosity of like, oh my God, like I'm learning all these different things. And so you have no clue where that takes you. So you have no clue where a conversation, case in point, like you had no clue clicking a button to come into Slack would lead to whatever the mind blown was, but now this conversation that we're able to have. And wherever
Yeah,
this takes us, right? Like
that's
if you
right.
have that mindset, conversation today leads to nowhere, you've nowhere in the future, go with it.
It's part of the journey, man, and it's got to make that first step and just be open to whatever the heck it is. And yeah, podcasters, I feel like in creators, I guess I want to just silo podcasters, but creators are very open, and I think it's such a cool mindset to get that feedback and engage with others. Obviously, having our own focus is key, and figure out what is our message, because I know the folks listening and the folks I chat with, like a lot of folks are just still trying to dial in what is that key thing that they want to share with the world. And then tools like Castmagic or even people within the communities can help refine that and make that process easier. But really, it's figuring out what's the core thing for you. And I'm actually curious, like for you, because you mentioned like led by trust, love, fitness, and adventure. And I heard you kind of mention it. It's in your bio, but I was like, that's cool, because it's obvious that you're fueled by these point ethos. It's like that's part of your message. So
100%.
I'm curious about your journey of how you found Cast Magic, but what you've done in podcasting, like in some of these other ventures, and
So
then
my
yeah.
background is media sales. I was in the media world for about 15 years or so. But my first stint in the podcast world as a business as opposed to a consumer was selling podcast ads for, at the time it was CBS Radio. Now it's Odyssey. So this was 2016, 2017, when the radio stations were still trying to figure out. Most of what they were doing was taking their radio shows, putting them as podcasts. But like I loved it. I gravitated because it was also like podcasters are influencers, right? Like radio always says we were the first influencers, right? So it was great to then go like, well, I've got this suite of products that I know nothing about, and let's go and try and sell them and learn like host read ads, dynamic insertions, and so forth. And so that was the first stint, but that's still on the media side. I got burnt out with media. I wanted out. Last job I had was in the mobile app space. And so we had about 200 apps in our portfolio. Three we required were in the podcast space: Player FM, Breaker, and Podkicker. Day one, CEO's like, go figure this out. And so the joy of being a listening platform now gives you the power to go, I've got no skin in the game, but to help serve the end user,
Yeah.
which is the listener, but also in this case, the podcaster. So it was working with all the hosting companies. And this is where I started getting on my soapbox of getting upset with podcasters say I want to get discovered, grow my audience, and monetize.
Mhm.
And so if their show was not on our platform, I'm like, well, then how can you actually say that you want to grow your audience and you want to be discovered if you haven't even gone in there and clicked the one button inside your hosting account to make sure that your show's everywhere, or taken the extra step to make sure that your show's everywhere? So it really gave me a good insight of podcasting. But back to my media role, I was also in the partnerships. Like I gravitated towards partnerships. So what's cool about partnerships and podcasters, they both use the same word, community.
That's
And
right.
let's bring it back to the original conversation here of community. So everything's community based. So if you're thinking about it as all rising tides raises all ships, podcasters go on other shows and they're helping each other. Like going back to podcast movement, no one was talking about like, no, we can't share best practices. And we're literally having conversations so that your audience has insights that best practices that they're all going to do whatever they want with them. And that was one thing I always told every person I talked to. I'm like, I'm going to give you the best practices. Take it or leave it. No skin off my back. If you don't take it, then someone else will, and they'll see the results versus you.
Yep.
No biggie. So I did that, ran those, and then ended up here because I got tired of, once again, podcasters thinking just downloads and
Yeah.
thinking I'm a podcaster. Own that badge of honor. But back to your comment about being a creator, I even did my LinkedIn post about it. Was Jay-Z says, or I'm not a businessman, I'm a
Uh-huh.
business man.
That's right.
And so if you think about that, a podcaster, you are a brand. So if you think about what does a brand provide you to do, you can go beyond just downloads. You can go beyond just video clips. And now you can start thinking about all these pieces. So when Blaine, the founder of Castmagic, showed me Castmagic, I'm like, I'm on board. Like this now literally allows a podcaster to think, and a creator to think far beyond just a one-trick pony.
I like how you said that, man. And with partnerships, that's what I've always loved about podcasting is it can be this hub for a relationship that can grow in so many ways. And it could be on someone else's show, it could be on my own show or your own show. And It's all how you think about it. Yeah, it's like it could be your brand, it's your PR, it's your marketing, it's your sales. It could be, lead generation to your business and offers. I mean, it's really whatever you make of it. Podcasting can be, but it's thinking about how do you want to structure that, the workflows, the tools like Castmagic can really help save so much time and open up a lot of interesting ways to showcase your voice to other places. And I think that's what pumps me up is like now more than ever, there's all these tools and things to help further our voices, and have us connect with a larger and the right audience is really the better thing. But it's like not getting lost in the sauce in that whole process. A lot of people kind of get lost on how to do all of those things, like the moves in between. Hey, I want to just break really fast because we were talking about this tool, Castmagic. I got Greg here, head of partnerships. There's no secret that I love this tool. That is why I made this episode. And it's for you to not only learn about Castmagic and how this could save your time, because I have been using this in my business now for like 3-4 months, something like that. And every single podcaster, anyone who's creating content, even someone with webinars, coaching calls, if you're coaching people and doing private sessions, holding events and you want to get summaries, there's so many uses. There's a free way to try this out. I urge you to give it a shot and run some of your content through this and use it as a use case for what you're learning right here. And you can see exactly what we're talking about. So go to hustleandflowchart.com/castmagic, and that'll get you there. Make sure you go try it for free. You're going to like it. I'm very curious to hear what you think about it, and definitely use what you're learning here and join their community as well in Slack. Make sure to do that to make the most of it. Go to hustleandflowchart.com/castmagic and go give it a shot.
If I go 2 years ago when I was running it, I get it. I wanted to be blue in the face, going like, "You're not doing all these things." But the person on the other phone talking to me would be like, "Greg, I'm a one-man band. I'm one woman band. Like I can't do everything. I got to choose." But now with tools that have come about in the last year, you're like, "Oh, I can literally do this as a one person. I can use this to record, this to edit, this to repurpose my hosting company." Like you can do everything you want inexpensively,
Mhm.
conveniently, and now mass out there so you can finally reach an audience where they want to be, as opposed to I only wanted them to listen. And if I only want listens, why do you only want listens?
Yeah, I guess it comes down to what's your business. What are you trying to go after? Because if you're going downloads, CPMS, I guess that's the sponsorship route. So you're going for mass audience, and maybe you're paying for that audience or whatever it might be. And then you have like the other side, which is like maybe a coach, an expert, someone that can package up their own services and then like find a core audience that then directs to that way to monetize rather than sponsorships.
I'll look at it. I think all of them go together,
Yeah.
and you should be looking at it as all options, right? So if you're thinking about that sponsorship person who wants more downloads, they can go sell more sponsorship dollars or whatever. I'm gonna push back and go, hold on. Why are you only thinking about downloads as the sponsorship? What about your newsletter? What about your social? What about your website? Like, couldn't you get more money if you start thinking about your entire package of a brand as opposed to I'm at a $30 CPM for whatever I'm selling as a dynamic ad insertion or whatever 100 different versions of an ad I want to put in there, right? You're like, hold on, I now just opened myself up. And if I'm a smaller podcast, maybe I only have 200 downloads. It's like, am I going to get a $30 CPM 200? Like that doesn't even add up. So now I've got to think creative of how do I do all this. But if you're then just looking at monetization from a sponsorship standpoint, then I'm going to push back and go, that's one component. Where are the other components? What about the guest you have on your show? Can you start thinking about that? I had a conversation with someone and their listener was pushing back because they're a real estate agent. And they're like, I'm not going to go do a show on fishing because I got to be focusing on real estate. And I'm going to go, hold on, why not do a show on fishing? Because any guest that you bring on is probably going to be someone that you could potentially sell to. Now you have the commonality of a connection going like, I really like Joe because Joe and I had this great fishing conversation. I don't know anything about his skills in terms of real estate, but he's a realtor and I'm going to start referring. So you can literally use every aspect of your show to monetize however you're looking at, whether it is SEO long tail. Like one of the things during podcast movement, both keynote speakers said they had written articles 3 years later. Major companies found those articles, reached out to them, and that gave them a new opportunity. So you have no clue where something today is going to lead you in the future. But if you are only focused on, I need more downloads so I can go sell more sponsorship, think about what you're leaving on the floor.
That's right, man. And
Mic
now,
drop.
yeah. Are we done?
We're done.
You just want to go on. No, I'm just kidding. No, I love it, man, because it's holistic. Yeah, that's the whole thing, and that's exactly what I've said for so many years. It's like this. It's a flywheel. If you can hook all the stuff together, then it starts to compound the efforts. You mentioned SEO and long form. That's been the number one driver of organic traffic to, or obviously organic, but new traffic for years now. Like that's been the best consistent growth lever is that, and that's having great show notes. It's doing articles. It's optimizing it, doing all the whole nine. That's why I have an SEO series. So anyone want to know, just go check out Gert. Yeah, like it's if you leave it that, and that's the thing where Castmagic I know solves. And I'm just gonna freaking pitch it for you. I'm just gonna since we're on the topic, SEO show notes, like you could run them through there because that's probably the number one piece I see when I see someone at the podcast. It's like, where are your show notes at? It's like, well, now you're not going to be able to be referenced by any search engine. I know they're doing the AI stuff, but you can still become a source, and you want to have that at least out there in the ethos to back up the content you just spent all this time producing. Now you have all these tools to kind of run it through and do it quickly. But even before that, it's like just do something, like put something on there.
Even before that, it was just do the right thing. Like I had a call with someone today, and I had to go like, hold on, did you just redirect me to your hosting company's website? Like you're literally selling yourself as a brand, but you're taking your brand and putting it onto your podcast hosting website. So you're losing all your SEO, you're losing all your value. Now you truly are locked in with that hosting company, but like
Yep.
why? It literally took no effort to do something of setting up a simple website with each web page dedicated to its own episode with show notes, SEO, like build that equity. Otherwise, yeah, you're
Yeah.
you're literally just focused on downloads, and then how are people still going to find you?
Well, and you make a good point too, because this is a pretty common question. It's like, oh, my hosting can do my show notes for me. It's like, yes, they can, but you don't own them. And yeah, what happens when you leave? Like, yeah, there might be a way to export all that. They're probably going to make it difficult, but all the SEO love is going to that company, not your brand, not your domain, which could take years to season with all the search engines, but it's like and to become discovered. But yeah, like put it on your own platform. Like for me, it's SEO for names of the guest or the brand name or the topic. It's like three things I kind of juggle around depending on what we're doing, who it is I'm talking to, and all that. And it's paid off with consistency. I'm curious, Greg, like what other pieces of content do you think are like pillars or ones that people are missing out on that can easily be created with either Castmagic or just with the flow of everything here?
I mean, look, the standard is you do your, let's take this, right? We're using Riverside to record.
Yeah.
So you're smart, you got video. You're going to put this then into its audio. So you've got a podcast. Great. You're reaching a person where they want to be, whether it's video or audio. But then you're going to cut this into little clips and cut downs in that regard. That's usually what most people are thinking about. But now with the tool, Castmagic, you're able to go ahead and go, give me the show notes, give me a blog, give me a newsletter, give me the too long didn't listen highlights of this show. Because as a user, as a consumer, as a listener, I want you to tell me, hey, sit back, relax, enjoy my show, enjoy this conversation. If you miss anything, go to my website. I got some quotes from both of us that we talked through. I got too long didn't listen highlights. Like now you're engaging me back there, and I can go like, great, I'm just gonna sit here, and if I want it, or you put in the show notes, like you're giving me access to where I can go to actually engage with that. So if you start thinking that way, then there's so many things you can do. And then like
Hmm.
some of the prompts I love, the too long didn't listen is one of my favorite.
I
The
like that.
analogy, metaphor, and parable is probably my favorite because that's how I think. Like put this conversation into simple forms of a metaphor. I'm like, oh, I get it now. Perfect. Because whether you and I said it and they don't get it, maybe a metaphor about fishing is going to help them. I don't know. Course creation. I love that one. Like you can literally now take this and start building a course on selling. So you've got now another way that you can start thinking about monetizing your value and your brand, teaching people, whether it's paid for course material or not, or maybe you give that to someone else. Who knows? Another one I love is an acrostic puzzle, an acrostic poem.
Interesting.
So, like, let's say you did every episode, you loaded into Castmagic and was like, all right, give me an acrostic poem on your name. And so now everyone's going to remember your name, but it's specific to that particular episode of what we talked about. And now your name becomes its own tweet thread. So I now got two pieces of content relevant to that show. One lives on Twitter, one lives on wherever I want it, and it now can resonate with other people. Yeah, I love that one. But that's
That's
just
rad.
who the Wassermans are.
I mean, I haven't used either of those. The too long didn't listen one sounds good. I know there's so just for folks if you haven't used Cast Magic, and I definitely want to dive into some of these components on how it works because it's pretty game changing once you realize like, oh, okay, that's how it's being, how you get these outputs. Essentially, it's and you can totally correct me, but like the way I understand it is, you upload your files, you can do it however which way you want, but audio, video, and beyond, and then it's going to transcribe so everything is in your words and the way you speak, and now you have all of these outputs that are predefined based off of prompts like chat gpt style prompts, or there's even this magic chat that basically you can ask it anything, and maybe that creates a new prompt for you for future episodes that you upload can automatically generate. And that's what I love. It's like you can kind of keep stacking stuff that works, and I find new things all the time. So I wanted to kind of clarify that with the prompts that you've been mentioning here. That's how they're used inside of Cast Magic.
Yeah, perfect explanation.
Rad.
And that's exactly it, right? So come up with whatever. And then the other side is we've got presets in there based on different kind of functions. So podcasting, YouTube, coaching, meetings. So we understand that you are once again a brand and your brand does multiple things. So you may do podcasting and here's a way that you can disseminate that conversation. You may do these coachings and it's like, great, I would love to get an understanding of here's a worksheet, here's an email after my coaching, like let's go load it in there. I don't have to sit here and taking notes, and even if I do take notes, it's going to summarize it for me, but once again, like you said, it's in your words, and so that's what makes it unique. It's not coming out with outside voices or outside distractions. It's literally what are your thoughts.
Yeah.
And I'm an external processor, so what I love is I use our mobile app, and you may ask me for like a quote, and I'm going to sit at a paper and go like, I don't know.
Hmm.
Uh, but then I literally take the app and I start free flowing whatever my thoughts are, load it into Castmagic, and there you go. Now I've got literally what I said. I organize it and go, here's my article, here's my quote, here's whatever it is I want to repurpose because it's literally my words.
So I have the app. I have not used it in that extent though yet, and I think that's one of the beta things that you get inside the community as of yet,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
But either way, I love it. Like the fact that it will organize our thoughts. And that's where it's like Chat GPT in the app there. It's great. That's how I kind of ramble and then have it formulate. But with Cast Magic, now you're putting all these other extra layers on there that can have these predefined structures, I guess, to organize your thoughts into a cohesive thing. That sounds like you.
It's so cool. Like someone was saying that last week, they're like, I'm going on a road trip with my co-host. We're just going to sit there, record our
Mhm.
conversation, and then upload it into Castmagic. So we can go like, what should we be planning? Who should we be talking to? What questions? So like you do it all for your pre-structure of your podcast, of your content, so that
Mm.
you can make it more refined with going like, all right, if you've got, let's say I was on someone else's podcast previously, like, all right, well, I want to talk to Greg about something different. I'm going to go ahead and take Greg's podcast that he was on with someone else, load in Cast Magic, get questions that I could probably have now asked Greg that probably weren't asked during his previous, and going like, ooh, these are some good questions that we can start diving into, or get different answers from Greg based on these questions now. You're like, all right, now I can start sounding smarter because I'm asking better questions. And now Cast Magic becomes a resource of how do you become a better host? How do you potentially be a better guest? How do you interview better, or whatever the case may be?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Ooh.
it's really multiple use cases on that one.
Yeah, so it's not even post production; it's pre production. It's
Yeah,
everything, and yeah, I love the see this all the use cases, man. And there's so many things. I feel like there needs to be a doc. You probably already have it, and I know it. It's just this ongoing way to leverage it. I mean, that's how my brain works. At least it's like, oh, I'll experiment that because that's like maybe that'll work within my workflow that already is working. What this is doing now, it's like having me question everything with my workflow. It's like, okay, how can I implement this thing? Like you mentioned questions, like it's forming better questions. Like that can shortcut your research time, either with a guest or for a solo episode. You can ramble your thoughts on a walk or whatever with the app and then come back to Castmagic, when you're back and you're like, boom, I got my next 5 episodes planned out. Don't have to think too much harder on this. Now I'm ready to riff. Yeah.
100%. And then there's a discussion question. There's a component, the AI content that's already pre-selected for you based on content. One of them is discussion questions. So you could use that as a blog post, going like, all right, here's great juice that came out of this conversation that we didn't get to cover. Great, I'm going to turn that into in my own blog post with my own 2 cents. Or I can use that literally, how do I fuel my, going back to community when we first started, how do I get my community to answer these questions going, hey, you listened to this episode, what is your take on this? And you're literally,
Mhm.
we are giving you now 10 questions that you can ask your community and go, hey, tell me what you think on this. And now you can go like, ooh, these are good answers. I'm going to turn that into an episode, or I'm going to turn that into a blog post. Like, it all just feeds off of each other, which is also why ROI is proven. The more content you're putting out, not necessarily like the best content, but if you're putting out a plethora of content, that is going to increase your ROI. And you can look at ROI in so many different ways, but ultimately it increases.
Well, and the more you show up, right? The more money you're going to make. It's just kind of inherent. You're going to get more leads. You're going to attract more of the people that are resonating with your message. That's what's always in my mind. It's like, man, if I ever made one piece of content, I want to make sure that thing is going to be run through every little bit that I can to publish it on all the platforms. Make sure it's audio, video, written, all the ways that people are going to consume content and enjoy it and take that next action.
And that is the other soapbox I'd go on. Start thinking that consumers don't want to just listen. If you think about yourself back in school, and I know some people are like, I'm 40 years out of school, like I can't think that far, but like think about it. How did you learn best? How do you learn best? Is the way you learn best listening to something? Maybe not. So if that is the case, how do I reach a consumer who would rather read, or would rather get a short snippet of this, or rather do X, Y, and Z? It's like I now have the ability with tools to go, I can reach all the users
Mm.
who want to consume however they want to consume, and they can still hear me.
There you go. Also, in addition to what you just said there, it's this push and pull content. So every platform has a different intention with how people are discovering content. So it's like, are you pushing, are you pulling, or are you both? And show up both if you can, and work those workflows. I guess, it leads me to my question now. Like in your mind, Greg, like how would you starting from scratch, like the fundamentals? We talked about the show notes as being one of them, but like what are maybe a handful of workflows that you'd recommend, and using Cast Magic in mind too, because I definitely want to push it there. Like, are there other things that people are missing that you think are just like, okay, if you just followed this kind of workflow, you're going to be 80% better than, let's say, most out there?
My first question I always love to ask when I'm talking to podcasters is, who do you host with? And like, it's a really interesting, simple question, but like, you can tell based on what they're answering, why or what they're doing or what they could be doing differently, right? So if you are, good example, hosting with Megaphone, I'm like, oh, you care about monetization, because usually everyone that's on Megaphone, they understand it's Spotify, you're getting the best monetization. But if they don't care about monetization, I'd be like, all right, then why are you on Megaphone? And I got no skin in the game. I got nothing against them, but it's just understanding. Or it's like, I host with X company, and that's because they gave me a free tool or it was cheap or whatever. I'm like, okay, do you understand that? Are you actually making sure? So first thing I would say is pick the right hosting company. There's not really a wrong answer, but it's the right one for you. And then learn what that service does. But stay on top of that. I had a conversation with someone, and they're hosting with someone 2 years ago. Well, there's been updates to that platform that they knew nothing about. So yeah, you've got to stay in the know of things because things are constantly evolving. So figure out your hosting company. Get a website. Figure that piece out. Once again, don't just do everything on your own hosting company's website, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
So get those ducks in a row. Make sure that you have a page for every episode, because that, as you know, goes from an SEO standpoint, content, and so forth. And then from a workflow standpoint, record in all mediums possible. So put a camera on us. If it's just two talking heads, fine. If you feel uncomfortable with being the talking head, doesn't matter. You'll get comfortable with it. And
Yep.
your audience will either tell you, I don't like watching this and I'd rather listen to your voice, or I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to watch you, but I want to read. So start thinking about just having a the Riverside, Squadcast, like Zoom, LinkedIn
Hmm.
Live, whatever it is, just use that, get the content, and then also think about the audio quality. Like that is one thing that always turns me off. I'm like, "Ooh, I can't listen to this right now. Either your voice is annoying me or the sound quality is bad." So if that's it and you've already lost me as a listener, can you at least keep me engaging with your content because your content's good? And everyone tells me, "Hey, you should listen to this show." And I'm like, I couldn't get it. It was too boring or whatever, but I'll sign up for their newsletter because if everyone thinks that this is a good show, then great. I still want to get that information so I can talk once again to
Yeah.
community and go, hey, yeah, I listen to this too, or I read it, whatever the case may be. What other things in the workflow? So a Castmagic is definitely going to be a big thing because that is
Hmm.
going to take all this now and repurpose it. And then figuring out how do you get that back onto your website or your hosting platform. Pretty
Yeah.
simple in that regards. It's just a matter of making sure you're doing it.
That's it. And it's having the right people in place to help out if you need that, or at least the systems and checklists. And that's pretty much where I've been focusing. I'm like, okay, that's kind of the missing link for a lot of the cases is like, hey, just what's the glue in between all these actions that we want to do? How do we get to that endpoint? And as you just mentioned, and you mentioned email newsletter or newsletter, like I was going to make sure you said that or I would have mentioned it because like capture your audience, like give them a nice call to action every episode. Doesn't mean you're selling something, but at least give them the opportunity to take the next step with you when they're ready for it.
I mean, technically, you're selling something. You're selling yourself. You're selling your vision, your story, or whoever the guest is that's coming on there, right? So,
True. Yeah.
how do you engage with them and make sure that that you're not relying on the subscribe button and getting
Mhm.
notification like, all right, next episode's out. Like, no, like I want the newsletter. There's a guy down in San Diego. Like, I look forward to his newsletter every Thursday because it's different than any other content he's putting out. But at the bottom of his newsletter is like, here's my episode of my show. But his content then is a story that's very much on brand. So if
Mhm.
I don't ever listen to a show, he knows I don't listen to a show, but I will look forward to that newsletter because it resonates with me. So if you start thinking about all those different touch points, you don't have to reach all of them with the same user. They're going to be different users along the way. You
Yep.
just want to make sure you're reaching different users and they're engaging with you.
That's right, man. Because everybody's gonna attach to a certain platform modality, and that's what I learned too. It's like there was a period of time where we weren't sending any emails about the podcast. People are like, "What? Do you stop publishing the podcast?" I'm like, "No, I just stopped sending the damn emails." Okay, back to the emails now. It's like, yeah, and the same thing goes with Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever. And like just show up on all these platforms. And I think that's the aha moment I had when people started saying these little comments like, wait, where'd you go? Where'd you go? And it's like, it's consistency in all the platforms, not just the audio, which is tough enough for a lot of folks. But again, with the right workflows and getting that consistency muscle worked, it becomes natural after a while.
That, and I think I'll lean back onto what you said of what you're trying to help your community with. It's like, look, I'm a resource. I'm here to help you. I'm here to bring a cohort together so that like you aren't alone, but also know that I'm here and you're not alone. And I've been doing this. I'm going to coach you on those certain things. So I think there's value once again, community in the podcast creator community of like everyone wants to lift each other up. Everyone's
Yeah.
willing to, hey, what tools should I use? And as I tell people, like when they ask, like, why should I use Cast Magic over something else? I'm like, you're asking the person for the company to tell you. But my answer is try it. You're the ones that gonna tell me, do you like it or not? Like for me, I love our UI. It's simple, it's easy to use.
Hmm.
That is what makes it special. You may say, like, no, I like this other tool because it speaks to what you need. This is why there's so much quote unquote competition in the world, but there's enough pie to go around, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
what speaks to you is it's going to be relevant. And if you're like, I don't like Riverside, I'm going to use Squadcast, and like, fine, just
Sure.
do it. Just
Yeah.
pick a tool, learn it, and do it.
That's it, man. Thank you. Yeah, and you're preaching the same way that I preach too. It's like, man, there's going to be a lot of different tools. The point is to stick with something that works. I mean, I found something that works great, Cast Magic, and Riverside's working great for me. But like you said, there could be some issues. I've had issues with certain tools, and but the point is like figure out what you're trying to get done and stay consistent with it, and just know that the tools are there to be tools, and to leverage your time, have that extend your voice even further, and yeah, and What's your end game? Always have that in mind.
Endgame, I think is a good one, and I think that's one that maybe creators don't think about too much. Their end game is I want downloads, or I just want
Hmm.
to talk to people. It's like, oh, great, then talk to people. But if you're having a conversation, then use Castmagic, and now that conversation becomes multi-purpose out there. And so your end game was like, oh, I just want to have conversations. Well, shit, now I can do all these other things
Yeah.
that I never thought about being able to do before. So have those conversations with a coach like yourself, going like, all right, what is your end game? And can we think about how we can take that end game in multi-facet or
Yeah.
expand your original strategy thoughts of what this end game is and do even more?
Yeah, I love it, man. Well, hey, before we wrap up, can you hint any interesting things coming up with Cast Magic, or maybe some lesser known ways to leverage it that we haven't covered here before we wrap?
Lesser known ways. Let's see here. We covered on the different presets. I'm currently working on an events one because
Mm.
let's go back to the conversation of podcast movement. 500 hours of content that I never got to see, experience, and so forth. So imagine being able to put conference content into Cast Magic and get the quotes from the panelists, too long, didn't listen, kind of highlights. So that is a good one. But also what I love is start thinking global. Right? So the conversation you and I are having, why is this only relevant to English speakers? It's not. It just happens that we only speak English. Therefore, someone who's Spanish only or German only probably can't pick up on this. The nice thing about a tool like Castmagic is, while it's not going to do the whole transcription for you from English to Spanish, you can start doing your show notes and go, hey, translate these show notes in Spanish for me. And now you can start reaching a different audience and go, okay, once again, the person isn't able to listen because they can't understand English as a Spanish speaker, but they can go ahead and read the too long didn't listen highlights of whatever I'm sharing. Like your show's about reaching 55-year-olds and how to live your life the best. Why would that only be relevant to you in Nebraska when it could be relevant to someone in Italy? Right? You have no clue. So that's kind of cool about like another use case of is starting to translate certain things, not the whole transcript, but certain outputs into another language that will expand your SEO blog, expand your audience, start building a community that you didn't even know you could have. So I think that's a unique use case that I would start using more of Cast Magic.
I like it, man. Yeah, I wasn't aware of the whole multi-language thing, but yeah, it's a no-brainer, especially if you're on other social networks or have partners in other countries that might help you out to kind of head that up. I know a big thing is translating or overdubbing, even content. I mean, there's tools for helping that and extending your content in other markets that you're not there right now. So yeah, and knowing your audience is key. So if you see if you're looking at your podcast stats or Google Analytics and you're like, wow, I'm getting a lot of hits from these countries, or like the interest over there, well, maybe serve them. Yeah, serve them better, and you have the tools.
I mean, look, I'm sure you could do your website and have it, hey, English, and then below there, like, here's the other, or a link to another, hey, you're interested in this in another language, like, here's that. Like,
Yeah,
that's just going to help you from an SEO standpoint.
it would.
And if you're worried, I don't know if the translation is accurate, as someone's told us in our Slack community, like, well, then someone's going to read it and go, hey, this doesn't make sense. Like, oh, wow. I'm getting engagement in another language and someone's telling me this is wrong. I'm like, great. How do we create that value then? So like you now can start learning even more about your users as opposed to I can reach the globe, but it's got to be English because we're in English. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
those are other things I would start thinking about.
I like it, Greg. Well, this is just the tip of the iceberg, I know, because Cast Magic is newer. It's what earlier this year, and as with most of the AI tools, but it's growing tremendously. So definitely urge you to try it out. And yeah, and Greg, thanks for just sharing your wisdom and your experience here with everybody, because it syncs up perfectly with what I was talking about too in my trainings and other previous episodes. So I think it resonated.
Look, you find me on LinkedIn. That's probably my major source of engagement and social. So it's just Greg Wasserman. Send me a message and let me know. Don't just send a blind one because, like I said, life is about time relationships. If I get an empty request, I'm like, why? Like, who are you? What are you looking for? But like,
Yep.
I just like helping people, and let's figure out how do we connect.
Cool, man. I appreciate you. That's how we connected here. It was in your community. So definitely, if you're in Cast Magic, go join and find Greg in Slack too. All
There you
right,
go,
buddy.
man.
We'll chat
Thanks a
again
lot,
soon.
Joe.
Go
Sounds great.
Padres.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you for listening to this episode with Greg. And if you're still here listening, you obviously were interested in Castmagic and using this in your business, using it with your content. You can use it for things outside of just podcasts. And we talked a lot about podcasts, but go try this thing out for free. There is a free trial. You could go test it out on some content that you already have. So go do that. Go to hustleandflowchart.com/castmagic. That's CASTMAGIC, hustleandflowchart.com/castmagic. Go enjoy. Go let me know what you think. Go join their Slack channel, of course, and I will see you next time. All right. That's what I got for you today. And remember, it's not all about living to work. It's all about working to live, if you need to do the work. But work can be fun, and it should be fueling for your life. So if you enjoyed what you just heard, if you got some nuggets of wisdom that you want to share, or you're just noodling on right now, please go tell others the way that people find this show and how you can help others get their aha moments is through word of mouth. So if it is telling your friend, telling your family, sending an email to your list, writing a review, or whatever it might be, everything helps. So thank you so much for listening to the Hustle and Flowchart podcast, and I will see you next time.